The honourable member for Regina Lewvan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to address the issue of overpayments in the Phoenix payroll system in this evening's adjournment debate. Being overpaid may not sound like a huge problem, but it is a huge problem when our federal public servants are asked to pay taxes and to make employment insurance and CPP contributions on money that they will ultimately have to return to their employer, the Government of Canada. Now, the government's original response to this situation was very lacking, and we saw that a huge number of 2016 T4s were inaccurate, tens of thousands. In order to try to avoid that problem for 2017 T4s, the government has tried to put forward a compromise solution. Now, Madam Speaker, we live in a social media age, and we have a government that is very keen on digital communication. So I am going to try to summarize that compromise by reading some tweets from the Department of Public Services and Procurement. So on January 5th, the department's Twitter account posted, #GOC employees, did you receive an overpayment in 2017? Call the contact center or your compensation advisor by January 19th, 2018. If the overpayment is processed by January 31, you will only need to repay the net amount. But then we have tweet 2 of 2. If the 2017 overpayment is not processed by the end of January, you will have to repay the gross amount. The pay center or your compensation advisor will confirm if your overpayment was processed. Now, Madam Speaker, it strikes me that the government should be trying to ensure that no federal public servant has to repay a gross amount that they are not actually receiving. But the government has tried to make this contingent on the January 19th deadline. So then what do we see? From that same Twitter feed on January 11th, #GOC employees, the Pay Services Client Contact Center is currently experiencing higher than normal call volumes. And then we have, if you are trying to report an overpayment, you may also submit a Phoenix feedback form to inform the pay center of your situation, and no further action will be required. We apologize for any inconvenience this is causing, and will keep you informed of our efforts to resolve this situation. Now, Madam Speaker, my office understands that when employees submit that online form, they don't get any confirmation of whether or not it has been received. So understandably, they're nervous, and I'm wondering if the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Services and Procurement can inform this House how many overpayments were reported by the January 19th deadline, and whether or not those files are being successfully processed for the end of the month. I would also note that the Minister of Revenue could issue a remission order to ensure that these Phoenix overpayments are not subject to tax, and I would like to ask the Parliamentary Secretary whether his government is prepared to issue a remission order to ensure that no federal public employee has to pay tax on a Phoenix overpayment. Thank you.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his question. And I'm pleased to let the House know of our progress with regards to overpayments. Indeed, the government wanted to prioritise overpayments, and so public servants who were affected in 2017, to avoid any consequential problems that may be raised when a T4 is inexact. In a more global context, and a more general context, the patience of public servants is challenged, but I would like to say to everyone that the government has deployed all necessary resources to rectify problems associated with the Phoenix pay system, and we do so, of course, in collaboration with our staff, with our union colleagues. The stabilization of Phoenix will be done by and for public servants. And so with regards to overpayment, yes, indeed, we had a system where if you had an overpayment in 2017, in that window in 2017, we would be able to give you a correct T4 if the public servant flags their overpayment, or if we have already identified that a public servant has received an overpayment. If we manage this within the window, a correct T4 is sent. Otherwise, an amended T4 will be sent to the CRA automatically, and the tax form that will be submitted by the employee will be automatically updated. And therefore, this would be one less effort to put forth by the public servant. Unfortunately, like my colleague no doubt knows, deductions, Canada Pension Plan, Quebec Pension Plan, employment insurance, superannuation, etc., that is up to the employee. And so the Minister for Revenue cannot take these deductions back. And that is why the gross amount has to be sent to the government. To mitigate this issue, because we know this issue exists, to mitigate the issue, we will only ask the reimbursement of the overpayment starting on the 1st of July, and only on the 1st of July. And then we will strike a very generous reimbursement plan with the employee. The employee will have the time to receive their tax rebate, and then they will be able to plan for reimbursing their overpayment. We know that this is not ideal, and that is why we wanted to focus and prioritize overpayments here at the beginning of 2018. And yes, we've received a number of public servants who have raised the matter, but we've already identified another large proportion of them. We are putting forward enormous efforts to mitigate the problem that my honourable friend has identified. And so I'd like to thank him for his statement, and I would be pleased to continue a dialogue with him to find solutions.
For Regina Lewvan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I also thank the Parliamentary Secretary for his remarks, although I know that he didn't really answer the questions that I raised, so I do want to provide him with another opportunity to enlighten this House as to how many overpayments were reported by the January 19th deadline, and to give us some sense as to whether or not they're being processed successfully. I would also like to raise this possibility of a remission order to ensure that federal public servants do not have to pay income tax on Phoenix overpayments. If the government is confident that the system will work as smoothly as the Parliamentary Secretary suggests, and that public servants will not be on the hook, then surely they should be willing to issue this remission order to make sure that that's the case. Thanks again.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. I want one thing to be abundantly clear. One thing to be abundantly clear for all Canadians and all public servants who listen to us. Every single public servant will have the amount that they have earned during their work. Every single public servant. All sums for public servants will be handed to them. That will be the case. Of course, with regards to overpayments, we must ask for the gross amount, and we will also implement very generous measures for reimbursement. That upon which I can't necessarily give comment is, yes, we have received statements from many public servants that had already been identified for many of them. And so to avoid doubling our statistics, I ask for my colleagues' indulgence. The information will be published, but we are working on it regardless.